Hello, everyone. I am Elizabeth Storter Pryor. I'm an associate professor of history at Smith College, and I am welcoming you to a conversation, Dismantling Systemic Racism in Ballet, hosted by Ballet West. And I'll say a little bit about my connection to Ballet West is that my son has been a student for the last couple of years at Ballet West and is now going off to college. And I had a conversation a few weeks ago when Ballet West stood up as one of the many businesses that were sort of supporting and reflecting on their relationship to race and racism. I reached out to Peter Mers, the director of the Academy, and he was eager to kind of jump in and start a conversation, and that's how this panel came into being. So we have a lot of exciting panelists. I'm gonna ask everybody to introduce themselves, and Roni White, I'm gonna start with you. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Roni K. White. I am a mental health therapist, nationally certified and state licensed, and I have my own private practice. I have studied ballet and jazz up until my late teens, raised two daughters, and one who just aspired and was inspired by ballet and pursued a career in it and is currently in Ballet West 2.
Katlyn Addison, will you please introduce yourself?
Okay, hello, I'm Katlyn Addison. I'm a first soloist. I'm a classical ballerina with Ballet West, and I'm from Canada, and I am Caribbean.
Thank you very much. Christina Johnson.
Hello. My career started at Boston Ballet, and then I joined the Dance Theater of Harlem, where I was there for 13 years. And at the same time, I'm an original member of Complexions Contemporary Ballet. I moved to Switzerland and danced in Switzerland for 7 years in Geneva and Basel. And when I came back to the States, I was the rehearsal director for Cedar Lake Contemporary Ballet, Carol Armitage, Trey McIntyre Project, and the Full Circle with Complexions again. And right now I'm on faculty at Marin Ballet in San Rafael, California, and also at the Dominican University with the Lines BFA program.
Thank you. And Joshua Whitehead.
Hi, I'm Joshua Whitehead. I'm a demi-soloist with Ballet West, and I'm from Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm just going to jump right in, and Roni, I'm going to ask you if you'll help us kind of lay the groundwork so we're on the same page. And basically, what are we talking about when we're talking about race, dismantling racism, and ethnicity? Like, what do those terms mean?
Yes, thank you for asking. So when we talk about race, there's different ways to look at it. And first and foremost, race is a social construct that was designed by a European to start divisions between human beings. And it's very argumentative of how that has come about with what constitutes a race. And in the United States of America, and defined by the federal government, they typically go identify race with white, with Black/African American, with Hispanic non-white, and with Asian, so to speak. Ethnicity is more exact to include someone's identity, both cultural and commonalities that affect a person. So in ethnicity, you may find that someone may say Caribbean American or Caribbean Afro-American, or they may go even further and say I'm Jamaican American or I'm Jamaican. And also with Asian, instead of taking the whole concept of Asian, with ethnicity, you'll get into more that they might be Pakistani, or they might go even further, like Urdu Pakistani. And so when you get into ethnicity, you're finding more of the culture within the identity and a race as an overarching term. Similarly, when they use the term Native American as a race, but someone might say I'm Choctaw, or they may say I am Cheyenne River Sioux. And so then you're finding more of the ethnicity. And I, throughout the conversation, will go more to ethnicity than to race. Race gets a a little bit more complex and doesn't always capture what one is speaking of.
Okay. Great, thank you. That's wonderful. That's really helpful. We have all talked before, and we kind of decided we wanted to jump in and have the first conversation when thinking about race and racism in ballet really centered around the topic of the look. So I'm just going to kind of throw it out. This is like a standard fair thing. My son, like I said, has been dancing, and he'll say, somebody has the look, or somebody, you know, so-and-so has the look. Can somebody, Katlyn, can you talk about what is meant when somebody says, you know, talks about this thing, the look in ballet?
Well, usually when you're thinking of the look of a classical ballerina, you look at their aesthetics, you look at the lines that they're creating, the artistry, the quality of their movement, and all the tools of their technique and everything else that goes in that toolbox to create this ballerina. But many times when people think of the look of a classical ballerina, sometimes I would think of like a jewelry box ballerina, that picture that you see of a ballerina in a jewelry box. But a classical ballerina, I think the look is somebody who has all those tools, you know, their aesthetics, they're constantly creating different lines, and their quality of movement, their artistry, and their technique, and that special quality of a classical dancer.
Great. And I mean, this really is to anybody, you know, Christina, Joshua, when you think about the look, is there a way in which that term can work against a dancer of color? Is there, in your thinking through it, is the look more than just, you know, aesthetics, but is there kind of a racialized element to that quality, really opening up to everybody?
I think it can be. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the individual, of course. It depends on the artistic director. It depends on the ballet masters. I also think it's a little different for guys sometimes, because you know you can a lot of times in companies there's certain individuals that say, okay, this person might not be classically as strong, but this person has, because of their body type, they have muscles that twitch a little bit faster, so they can do like roles like, I don't know, like jester and things like that, where someone who has longer muscles wouldn't be able to do certain roles. So to answer your question, there are times where yes, the look can make an African American feel some sort of way about themselves and what they were born with, and they can take that to a negative aspect. However, it's also sometimes you can, like for me, it's sometimes for guys, it's like it's something to strive for. And I brought this up in the meeting that we had, like as far as like being a football player or a basketball player. You know, if I wanted to be a linebacker right now with my current body, I wouldn't able to be a linebacker or a running back, maybe a wide receiver. So the look of a linebacker is someone who's a little bit more bulky and who can really explode. So yeah, that's I think I answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is that there's elements like that. There are parts that might of this idea of the look that might actually alienate some dancers, but then
For
also
sure.
there are some realities of a body type, like, if you are, if you're built very huge, and that you might not work in certain roles, or even it might even
Yeah.
be difficult for you to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Or to add to the complexity of that, and and first you starting with to add to the complexity, but still keeping with the football metaphor, and then translating back into ballet, and how limiting it can be if it's a thought of there's only one look. For example, the quarterback in football there was always a certain look, and there was also a lot of racism around that they thought a Black person wasn't smart enough to be a quarterback, especially in the NFL. And the quarterback was thought to be tall, to see over the line, right, over the linebackers and everyone else. And yet we have people that have come in and been amazing quarterbacks, defeating the look of even a quarterback.
Yeah.
And, right, like Russell Wilson is shorter than your typical quarterback, and has done amazing qualities with it. So as you're right, there's a skill that's needed, and then is this necessary to be open to understanding or challenging, why do you perceive that it only can be one way, and is my perception of that limiting, or is it accurate for safety, right? And
yes, no, absolutely.
So I agree with you, Joshua, just to transform it and add the complexity, to thinking about the look, even when we're talking about muscle tone or muscle type, whether we're talking about elongated muscles or stocky muscle set, but even in ballet, because the female ballerinas are subject to that as well, where they're told, oh, you're getting too bulky, or trim down your thighs. And so then we talk about, African Americans or from the African diaspora, and you have certain leg types that do carry a thicker muscle, quad muscle, than some European or European American thigh muscle types, right? Quadriceps we're talking about. So it can be dangerous too in how you're asking someone to sculpt their body in certain ways, because some sculpting and certain body types can promote injury, and it can be less safe for that person, even if they are able to carry out the skill and the technique in the way that is intended.
Yeah. And also, I think we talked about this last time, like the look, let's say the look in Brazil for a female ballet dancer, it's totally different from I would say the European look, in my opinion, from what I've seen with the females and the male body type. And this is why they're able, I mean, they're amazing dancers, and they're able to do incredible things. And that's why I said, it's like at Ballet West, the look, for the most part, like the Ballet West is known as a tall company. And then you have other companies in America that are like Miami City Ballet. They're short. So this is why I'm saying, like, as far as the look, it depends on the director at that time, So there's so many aspects to
the look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let me push a little bit on this. So yeah, okay. So there's a tall ballet, there's a short ballet, but when I haven't been, I'm not going to lie, like I'm not going to overstate my knowledge of ballet or the ballets that I've been to. But when I've gone, other than seeing like Dance Theater of Harlem, I have mostly see what appears, and it's not easy maybe from the seats I'm sitting in to be able to tell, but that most of the dancers who are up there are not dancers of color. That's what it looks like in the audience. So there must be some way, because I know that there are Black dance schools, and there are a lot of little Black kids who want to become dancers. So there must be something that happens in terms of this look. I can't imagine, for example, that directors are like, I'm not hiring somebody Black, but this idea of the look might inadvertently be something that stops them from hiring somebody who's well, right. So do you think, does that make sense to you when I'm asking, or I'm trying to get to?
Oh, absolutely. It also, you're right. I mean, to be honest, there might be a director who says, yeah, I'm not looking for, I don't want to hire an African American. There might be a director who says, I don't want to hire an African American at this point. We're looking for someone who's white, someone who's Asian,
Or we already have one.
That's where I was going.
And we already have one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that those are all possibilities. It has a lot from where I'm from. It has a lot to do with the culture. Ballet is not, like in Portsmouth, Virginia. Ballet is not a thing. Like no one thinks about being a ballet dancer. It's either they think about other things besides doing ballet, to be honest.
When you're saying they, wait, Joshua, when you're saying they, you mean young Black people? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And ballet can be very expensive, extremely expensive, especially for females. I mean, those just private lessons. It's hard for a female to get a scholarship. I mean, we're not even talking about pointe shoes and how much money it takes to be able to provide pointe shoes and
the leotards and tights.
Like all of that. I mean, I can't even really speak up on all of that because I'm a male. So Katlyn, if you want to jump on that, go ahead.
But even with the affordability, that's not the main barrier in ballet, because many sports and many pursuits, as you get more and more involved, come with costs. And I was raised in New York, so my first intro to ballet was literally in New York, and then in New Jersey continued. And my own daughter started in Jersey, in Jersey City, and then we moved to Maryland, and her continued. And yes, it gets expensive, but the sports that my other daughter played arguably were expensive as well. And the barriers we faced more so were internal in the studio, with the look, when it came to even her hair, when it came to her leg line and understanding it. And she had the opportunity, which became a very valuable opportunity, that she was in 2 programs at once. She was in a school here in Maryland, and then she was part of the Dance Theater Harlem pre-professional program, which helped her more understand her body in ballet and her leg line in ballet, so that she can start discerning and understanding the different comments that she was receiving. And they were very different. One could be harmful at times, where she's thinking she's doing everything wrong, but because the person didn't understand how to work with her as her body type and her leg line, because she has an extreme hyperextension, and it wasn't being also respected. She was being told her leg was always bent. Her knee was bent, her knee bent. And then when she tried to self-correct, thinking, okay, they want this type of look of the leg, then when she was at Dance Theater Harlem, they're saying, why are you bending your knee? She's like, but it's straight. They're like, yeah, but for you, that's bent, because this is how your leg is, and this is what a straight knee is for you. And so it also gave her the empowerment to advocate for herself and understand more of what's needed.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like there needs to be more ballet instructors who are able to work with all different ballet body types, so that they know how to help or work with a ballerina to create like that long line, that aesthetic line that we are as looking for in that look for a classical ballerina. So I do feel like in different these classical ballet schools, there needs to be more maybe teachers that have a lens that they can work with all different body types to then create that unique classical ballerina look. And then for myself, just talking about the hair that you mentioned, Roni, for a second there, just for fun, before this, I Googled classical ballerina hairstyles. And I was like, okay, let me see what they have out there for ballerinas to look at. And it was all one texture of hair. And yes, it was slicked back in a bun, which everyone wants to achieve, but it was yet again sort of only suited towards the Caucasian young dancers, that they can own, like the hairstyles were only suited for those type of dancers. So it's sort of, you know, as a young dancer, if I was going to Google and look up a hairstyle to do for ballet, I would be like, oh man, like my curls are a lot tighter. So I don't know like how I would fit into that unless like I slick back my hair, but it's still not achieving, maybe it's short, maybe I'm not achieving that bun. So the look also, you know, it affects our hair and hairstyles as well, and what we see, you know, online, looking up hairstyles. Like I think I scrolled down and then I finally found one dancer with tiny thin braids, where she was able to achieve that look of slicked back hair that a classical ballerina has. And maybe that vocabulary could change, and it will change. And as we know, it will change with directors wanting to create more an inclusive, as long as your hair's out of your face and it looks elegant, then you'll have that look. You can achieve that look of just thinking about the hairstyle of a classical ballerina.
You remind me of something in teaching. A lot of times we talk about like universal access, right? So just like even the way that you just framed that, like hair out of your face, neat and elegant, is different than, you know, this traditional bun, the pullback. Yeah. You know, like this opens up. This says anybody who can get their hair out of their face and make it look in a certain, you know, in a certain way, rather than kind of pigeonholing it or directing it to one particular style that does alienate people.
Exactly. And I think it's important that classical ballet still keeps that like pure special, like this is a special art form, you know, you have a, what am I thinking of? A uniform. I think that's sometimes nice. I like that. And also it teaches kids discipline. And I think that's important. But I do like, and from my personal experience, I tried everything with my hair. I relaxed my hair at one point to create that slicked back look. I, you know, wear braids in my hair, as you can see now, to have like sometimes a longer hair if they're longer when I'm in season, so that I can create a French twist and sometimes slick it up into a high bun and then a low bun and whatever the choreographer is asking for, that I'm able to create that. But it would be really unique for us to, for the ballet world too, then to open up that to just having still uniforms, still slick back out of the face, but that it's not like you need this particular texture of hair. I mean, they're not saying that, but that's what I see. If you Google, anyone can Google it, look up classical ballerinas hairstyles, they can see it themselves, that you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to see some dancers of color. With,
just to add to that, sorry, yeah, just to add to that, I would love to hear Christina's take on that as well. Even same Katlyn, right, like trying the perm or the relaxed style, but unfortunately with our experience, it ended up ruining the hair, and massive hair loss happened, and going back to just a non-chemical treated hair. However, right, there are workarounds, but then what happens also in studio or in class or behind stage, there are a lot of microaggressions that can be received when you're putting in added hair pieces to achieve a particular look. Now, the look could be achieved with the hair that the choreographer or that's what's being asked for the piece, but then how the human decency and respect to understand, like, we are on stage, we're performing, and so added pieces, it's really part of performing. You have entertainers that, regardless the length and hair type, whether they're 1C or 4C, you know, hair, they still put in hair pieces even to protect themselves, to protect their hair from even the lights and some of the comments and treatment that a dancer can endure when they are not within the majority hair type. And then using hairpiece aids in order to achieve a particular style.
Christine?
No, you just made me think of a couple of things. In 1990, I think this has to do with how, weaving people of color into the school, into the company ultimately, and then also about wigs. The Royal Ballet in London was doing a program called A Chance to Dance, and they the idea was to go into kind of inner city communities and recruit dancers of color, students, into their school, because they had a school that you could the students lived there and trained there, and it's the school, I think it's called White Lodge. It's the school that feeds into the company ultimately, and they brought in Ronald Perry and myself to be the guest artists for the Nutcracker. We were the Sugar Plum Fairy and the Cavalier, because they wanted to feature a Black couple, because that had never happened before. So that, this could be part of, we were brought there as A Chance to Dance. And unfortunately, that was in 1990. And something happened. Like, it's kind of what you're talking about, maybe, like what happened between the recruiting, and I don't know the numbers, I don't know if they recruited, I don't know what the percentages were or how many went through the school, or what happened to have it so that in 2020, I think I looked a couple of years ago how many, Black people there were in the company, and relative to the 1990s when we did this, it just seemed quite like, something didn't work here. So so there is something between maybe the training, right, and then actually getting into the company and becoming a professional. So that's one thing. And the other thing, it's a small thing, but at the Royal Ballet, they have wigs for everything. I mean, it's all, they have a whole wig department. And we went to get our wigs fitted, and they were blonde. Nobody thought to, they put them on. It's like, no, this isn't gonna work for us. And they made us new wigs, but we also had to speak to that, right? We also had to say something, because if we didn't say anything, it would have, so it's just, perceptions, and also tradition. And at that time I was a dancer of Harlem, so I was already wearing my brown tights. And so that was also a conversation I had with myself, like, should I wear the pink tights for the Royal Ballet, or should I wear the brown tights? And so that was another thing. I think I went a shade lighter than usual, but there is something about that from the schooling and training and into the company. That's why Arthur Mitchell started his Dance Theater of Harlem.
You hit on this thing about the tights, but for people like me who don't really understand, like, what's the big whoop about not wearing pink tights? Like, can you say a little bit about why that's important? And the other thing that maybe I'd kind of like to hear maybe from everybody, but if you could answer that question first, is like this idea of having to assert yourself, of having to say the blonde wig doesn't work. Like, so let's put that on hold for a second, and tell me a little bit about why the tights matter.
So I think I can best articulate it by my own story. And first, for those who don't know, and there may be many that don't, when this light pink, so when we talk about ballerina pink, it's a lighter pink color. And the shoes are matching. You go to a ballet store, it's matched. The shoes, this is my foot and leg. Shoes and tights match. And when a Caucasian skin tone is under the lights on a stage, pretty much there's the skin tone, and it kind of matches the legs. So there's like a one line that the body is making in terms of flesh tone. And so that's the aesthetic. As a ballerina training in ballet, at least in my day, and it's changing slowly, but pink tights, pink pointe shoes, that's everybody. That's just the uniform. There was never even a thought in my mind or even consciousness that there was anything else that needed to happen. So I was at Boston Ballet, and I decided to go join Dance Theater of Harlem after 2 years. and it was a career change. It was conscious a career change. It was conscious. I consciously chose Dance Theater of Harlem. When I walked into the studio the first time, and I looked in the studio, I just saw all these shades of brown legs and pointe shoes, and I had never seen that ever. And it seems like I would say, oh my God, look, there's lots of me. The first thought was like, wow, this is different. Like, this is different. Wow, what is happening here? And then, of course, that's part of the uniform, so to speak, at Dance Theater of Harlem. And they're different shades. It's not like light and brown. There are 7 or 8 different shades. So everybody's skin was matched with their shoes. So I remember that when I started wearing these flesh tone tights and I would look at my legs, I would look down, and it was kind of like, okay, like it was unfamiliar to me. They weren't the legs that I understood, that I knew the work in. And to look down at my kind of flesh tone colored pointe shoes, it was an adjustment. And then I started like seeing my reflection in the mirror and seeing myself and experiencing myself, and kind of like realizing like, oh, there I am. There's like all of me, like I'm all there. And it was really, it wasn't a moment. Actually, I'm only just being able to articulate this because I never really thought about it until these conversations started happening. It was never something to talk about. And at Dance Theater of Harlem, that was Arthur Mitchell's brilliance. And that was never a question for me to wear flesh tone tights. I would never wear pink tights after that. It just was like, it would be like chopping off half of my body in a way. I mean, not really, but that sense of like, I did have to wear pink tights a couple of times. Why was that? No, actually, no. After that, I never did. Because you have to have the pointe shoes to match. And that was just, yeah. So that was so wrapped up inside of that are a number of things. One of them is me before Dance Theater of Harlem, not even thinking or realizing or having a thought around seeing flesh tones, seeing my own legs, my own color legs, and not somebody else's, or not, I mean, another conversation could be there are different shades of white skin, or let's say Caucasian, or there's Asian, there's all kinds of shades. Like nobody's really that light pink. Well, some are, but so there's so many different shades of flesh. But the ultimate idea is to have a one beautiful, clean, seamless line from head to toe. So that's the tights, the flesh tone tights is probably one of the things that could be just a absolute non-negotiable thing that directors insist on from this day forward. Now it will take some implementing and planning, and there will be some ballerinas who actually may not want that. Like I can't say I wanted it, but because it's different. But I don't know, my personal experience, it's kind of, you have to go through a journey even as a Black ballerina with that. Maybe some other Black ballerina would have been like, had a very different experience. Maybe from the get-go, they've always desired that. It just never occurred to me. So the tights thing is a big deal. And when I see these amazing African-American ballerinas and half of their legs are pink and their upper body is beautiful brown, I'm always like, oh, yes, and hey, don't forget to next, I kind of like try to like, hey, how about those flesh tone tights next time, But I think it's not really a light thing anymore, light topic. Yeah.
Right, it's really, really helpful. And it kind of, like when you talked about the wig, which seems connected, right, to me, this idea of kind of recognizing, it's like almost like recognizing the full like personhood of the dancer while still kind of keeping in line with these
Yes.
the traditions or ritual, like there's a way they can go together. And Roni, I was wondering if you, like you said, you hinted at this before, you mentioned the term microaggression, and I was wondering if you could say a little bit about that in relation to this, and then I have a question for the panel.
Okay. And so, yeah, and to piggyback and extend with what Christina so eloquently and beautifully and heartfully shared is, and thank you for picking up on, every dancer of color is not going to have the same response or experience because from what you know or what you understand. And I think it also comes from that understanding and everyone having this pure understanding of this seamless line, and your leg line is part of you, and how also a brown dancer, you know, yes, they still have a leg line in their pink tights, but it really looks different if you take a photo of them in the same pose with their pink on pink and their flesh on flesh with tights and shoes. You would really be able to visually see what gets enhanced and what is interrupted. So if you really just think about the feats that dancers of color have achieved with getting into companies with beautiful leg lines, with them being cut off, right, with the pink on pink, and just imagine what can be with the flesh on flesh. And so what's happening here when you know that it's from having this seamless line, right, and it was basically to match the flesh tone to begin with, and when you put a dancer of color in the improper flesh tone, you're invalidating, some micro invalidation of their existence, of who they are. And you're disregarding the purity of the art form with the people that are performing it. And so you're having them try to execute something in a way that wasn't intended to be executed. And then you're judging them on that. So if that makes sense, like you're telling them to, you know, you want to look this way, and then some have been heavily criticized for not achieving it, even though they are achieving it. It's just that the leg line's getting or the line from head to toe is getting interrupted. So you're seeing it differently, and then you're being judged by that. Yet you're fulfilling a uniform that you're being asked to fulfill. And so, like just like with the wig, not even thinking, okay, this wig, because this person's playing this character, and is it that the character's blonde for Christina's sake, or did we have a blonde wig because typically the dancer in it was blonde? So that's a difference too, right? Like, does a character have a certain look, and then I'm presenting character because, like, if I was a fairy with blue hair, all right, let's go. However, give me the right shade of blue so it looks great on stage. Like, just don't give me any shade of blue, which kind of goes back to also the pink tight. If I'm wearing a pink tight, and even if Christina, Katlyn, and I, because we're 3 different complexions, and you give us the same exact pink tight, we are going to look different in that pink tight. Mm-hmm. And it might not achieve the look that you're looking for because you're giving us all the same pink tight. So if you were, just to use pink as the example, if you would give us the proper pink tight for our skin tone for whatever that look is on stage, if it's not about flesh, then we can carry off what's trying to be achieved. Right? So it's this disregard of who that person is, and almost like trying to say the huge micro invalidation of I don't see color. Well, unless you're colorblind, you should see color. It's all around you. If you can look and notice the different pigments of a tree, and look at the changing of the leaves, how can you not see the beauty all around you and the various pigmentations that grace this earth?
And a lot of times what happens is for dancers just getting into a company, the first thing you think about is I'm in a company, you know, and I don't want to, like, you know, stir the waters or shake the boat with something like Christina said that could be a small problem. And a lot of times you're just oblivious to it. You're just like, you know, it is what it is, you know, and, you know, something that through the conversations that we've been having, like, for example, I've been at Ballet West for maybe 10 plus years. and I've never had a dance belt. Like we get like the general flesh colored dance belt, but it's nowhere near my flesh color. It's meant for I would say probably 90% of my dressing room. Like I don't even get like a black dance belt. It's light tan, which that's not me. And so thinking about other things that I specifically have to deal with when it comes to costumes that other people don't have to, like certain straps that I have to color in before I go on stage while people are warming up. And earlier in our previous meeting, I talked about the difference between like racism and just maybe a director just being oblivious to certain situations that African American dancers have to deal with. And I think it's important to distinguish between the two, because sometimes there's a lot of, when it comes to a huge production, there's a lot of moving pieces. So if I don't, and this is on me, if I don't go up to my director and say, okay, even though this might be a small problem, it still feels like in a sort of way, in a small way, that I might not exist in this company, because the treatment, if you will, is just slightly different when it comes to pigmentation and costumes.
It's almost, oh, sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to say this is why I'm very thankful to have someone like Adam Sklute as a director, because he we have conversations all the time, and he tells me his door is open, and it is up to, it's up to a director to have his door open, but it's also up to, like Christina, you were saying, it's up to us as African American dancers to have enough courage to say, okay, let's make a change, and let's start with these small minor things.
You're just making me think of like there might need to be like a little cheat sheet for like even just wardrobe, just things that like, how many times you get a tutu or a costume and the strap is, needs to be pancaked to your color, like everybody else that has their, pink and that matches their skin, but they didn't think to make it brown for me, or even dancers that go out on stage not thinking like, that's supposed to look like you don't have a strap. It's supposed to look your flesh tone. So there's sometimes maybe even awareness around, okay, make sure your straps are this, and go to wardrobe and make sure they've got a brown dance belt or black, like just because, Dance Theater of Harlem, they did something which was so fabulous. And I don't know if other companies do it, but when you join the company, you get adopted. Somebody in the company decides you're my daughter, or I want you to be my daughter. And so there's this, and you are forever there. They say, when Mr. Mitchell comes in the room, this is what the expectation is. They're like, your shoes look ratty. Let me show you how to do it. This is the best color for you. This is how you do this. They're your parents, mentors in the company, and you get kind of schooled by them. And so I don't know if there's there's something about, we're doing it kind of social media wise, there's wonderful videos like Ingrid Silva doing her pointe shoes and showing everything she does. And finally, people are figuring it out in terms of supporting each other that way. But there could be just a good mindfulness, just even in terms of the wardrobe, and just, these are, you got to look for these colors, or you got to look who just joined the company, and, let's try to match the shade, all of that kind of stuff and probably at the Royal Ballet, you're right. That's a good question. I could have asked, like, so is the, sometimes the wig coloring is a part of the magical fantasy of it all. But they were very willing to change it. So I think they were conscious of like, oops. So yeah, those are those little things that can make a difference.
And to add into that, right? Like, so when we're talking about these microaggressions, and there's like 3 categories, they're nonverbal, they're verbal, and they're environmental. And so the fact that you, like, for example, walk in and only see blonde wigs, that would be an environmental microaggression. right? And so it's not that anyone said anything, but it's this assumption that the dancer that will complete this look doesn't look like you, basically. And then they break down into like a micro assault. So Joshua, that's what you were saying, like there's blatant racism. And so those are micro assaults. They're blatant, they're discriminatory, they're biased sentiments, right? Like those are micro assaults. And most of us truly can recognize those. And when you're stating, you know, Joshua, when like some directors, like that's not what they mean. Well, it could be more of a micro insult or micro invalidation, because both of those can include unintentional. Some are intentional, but also unintentional biases, whether it's behavior or verbal. And no matter what, the person receiving them, it doesn't feel good. And you can feel less than, you can feel powerless, you can feel invisible. It can increase your anxiety, you can feel marginalized, right? It increases your frustration. There can be a trauma response because you're also sometimes not even understanding what's happening to you, but something just does not feel right. And as you try to keep shaking it off, it's still building inside. And, you know, and when you said, you know, I realized I didn't have some of these conversations and I don't want to stir the pot, which is common. I don't want to stir the pot, or I want those others or the people in charge to feel comfortable. When we go our way, or we make concessions, or when we change our behavior to make someone feel comfortable, that's a micro defense, right? And it's a survival technique, but not always healthy for the person that's trying to navigate in this world. So we definitely agree, like everything's not intentional. However, that awareness, like you said, Christina, that mindfulness is crucial. And being able to be comfortable and have space to have these conversations, to talk about it and bring it into awareness in order to promote the necessary change for equity and equality in this beautiful form that is not meant for one ethnicity, and that's not meant for 1 or 3, you know, degrees of melanin.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point. And I was thinking about just kind of like the nuts and bolts of it. It seems to me like, depending on where you are in your career, like, right, because Christina, the story you're telling about the wig, you were an invited soloist. I'm not sure about that, but you were invited soloist at that point. And then at that point, it seems to me like you can say to somebody as an invited soloist, like, yo, like, this is off. But when you're starting your career, you know, you might, and that seems like kind of exhausting to me. And I remember, Katlyn, you talked a little bit in one of our conversations about kind of the idea of like the exhaustion of having to be constantly asserting yourself like this. And I was just, you know, wondering, do you think it's like, maybe like almost like hierarchically kind of situated, like when you're starting your career, you don't say it. When you're invited to, you know, fly across the country to dance, you know, you might be more willing to, like, or is this just something that you'd advocate for young dancers to come out of the gate and be like, this is what we need? I mean, like, what do you think, like, for young Black dancers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, go ahead, Katlyn.
No, go ahead, Christina. I'll piggyback.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
Okay. I think that's, you know, it's an awareness. It's a consciousness, a mindfulness. It's the younger the better, period. Like the younger the better. And that's, so we're talking about schools and big schools and companies, but like little schools, it's just, as we talk about this more, hopefully that will be part of that will become a normal thing when you have a brown child in your school, that is considered, and all that goes with that. And maybe it's you know, somebody like Dance Theater Harlem who like sends out, you know, whatever's needed to all these companies, like, here it is, here are the things you need to think about. Maybe it's not them, maybe it's, but somebody to just, because it may not be obvious, and it just could be it's the earlier the better. And yes, of course, once you start, you know, pre-professionals, and once you get the first company, you're not gonna, there is also that, like, you know, just dance, don't say anything, you know, don't speak, your voice isn't important. So there's also that psychology around the training that's, you know, many are trying to shift. I mean, you know, there's a lot of obedience, right, in the discipline of it. And so there's that like, what is that? What is speaking up for yourself and knowing yourself well enough, and what is, yeah, well, that would be ideal. And then how do you make that effective? Go ahead, Katlyn.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And also, like, in a company, there you create like this family. So I feel like it's not only up to like the sort of the younger vulnerable person. It should be also like I think everyone in the company needs to like have that awareness and have create a community in the sense where they all could recognize something and notice something, and maybe they could even speak up for those younger, newer dancers that maybe feel uncomfortable. Or because we all see it, we're in a community, we're all around each other, we hear about it or we see it. And when you do, I feel like it's also, as a human being, we need to act on things that we don't feel are right and aren't fair. And I think, you know, and I do like what you said, Christina, of Dance Theater of Harlem, how they have a big sister, little sister type of thing. I think that would be great if a lot of other companies have that as well. Is they all, like, the people who've been in the company for a long time can be a big sister to somebody else who is new to the company. Like, I know I have some dancers in the company that are my little sisters, and I look out for them in every way I can, not just in the dance world, but if they need anything, I will be there for them, you know, so that we also have that trust in that community, that family, that I feel like a lot of dancers, I hope, and I feel it, have that warm heart that they want to help each other. So I think it's also putting pressure on the dancers in the company to help one another and to recognize things and speak up for everybody, speak up for what they feel is the right thing to do.
And I would even add into what both Christina and Katlyn shared, and I agree, like, the younger the better. However, remember, like, let's not put all the weight on the dancer, right? It's the responsibility of all. And keep in mind all the different personality types, right? Because there is also just natural shyness. There are people that have not exercised or understood or developed their assertive skills, right? Because there's a way to engage in these conversations as well that can be promoting positive change. And so it's also, this conversation is important for those already with power and decision makers to give thought and not wait for a dancer of color to come to you, but really start thinking and reviewing and be reflective and be introspective about, like, what has happened. Have I and do I promote or perpetuate some unintentional or unconscious biases that are invalidating people that I employ or people that I am training? And so also do the work before someone has to come to your doorstep.
And that's what I meant about the younger. That's what I meant about the younger the better. Like that whole like the younger you can get that implemented for them, or the awareness around them, the better. And that, so that by the time they already know coming up.
Yeah, I think it was incredibly liberating for my own daughter to, you know, within her training of what she was able to at age 5 and 6, also the hands that were on her were trained by Alvin Ailey. And then by the time she was 8, even though she had a lot of white and European American type and some European instructors, and she also had the hands of literally Arthur Mitchell, Robert Gartland, and those of Dance Theater Harlem, Ashley Murphy on her, Lorraine Graves, right? Like, just taking her through her development and forward, and before she even went into college. So that was empowering and more liberating and empowering for her as a young dancer of color, with a lot of microaggressions that were experienced along the road.
Excellent.
This is a great point too that you're making, Roni, and Christina too, everyone, that, like, really the company does have to kind of recognize that maybe that the company, the dance studio, wherever the site of dancers is, shouldn't assume they're doing fine. You know, like, that they should immediately assume that there's probably some area that they are making it difficult for their dancers of color to acclimate. You know, that they might be, you know, for every, you know, person like Joshua who comes from a certain kind of neighborhood, who pushed through, who didn't care what people said to him, who got into ballet, there's a bunch of other kids like me who, you know, the kids told me I didn't fit in and I stopped dancing when I was, you know, 6 years old, right? You know, so I think there's like, this is a really neat idea. Like, so what kinds of questions might we want a studio or a company to be asking? Like, is it only costume oriented? I mean, if you could think of a question that you'd want a director to ask himself about his company so that he was creating an inclusive environment, what might it be? I know that's a kind of off the cuff question, but.
Well, first, I would want to make sure like the heart of the director was like sincerely wanting to create an inclusive company, like a very diverse company. Like I would first want to make sure that I feel his heart, that he really wants that. And I feel that with Adam Sklute, like he wants to create a piece of art through movement and like through dance, you know, with all different people. I need you to, could you ask the question again, just one more time, just so
I guess what I'm saying is, you know, I'm imagining a director sitting there wanting to make that diverse, inclusive, wanting that, but not really knowing what they should be looking for. You know, not knowing like, what's my first step in, you know, because you can want it in your heart and then still go about business because you don't really, you know, I have good intentions, and then you get in there and you get a dancer and you know, they're both wearing pink tights and you're like, well, that line is much better, without thinking like, let's get that blank dancer out here with some brown tights and then I can really judge, you know, like, so what are the, what might be like a step one, I guess, of somebody just to open their own heart and I guess not just to open their heart, but what action item could they take?
Even with that, what makes it complex, and I hear what you're saying, is the directors that exist, right? They have different mindsets, different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
They have different degrees of biases and what have you, but even taking all of that into account. And so obviously we're not saying like, these are the questions, because like Katlyn said, there's a lot of introspection that needs to happen as well, and checking of how they see. So one first possible way to start being reflective and introspective is first and foremost, even asking yourself, what is ballet? When I think of ballet and close my eyes, what do I imagine first? How do I appreciate differences, right? Because if you don't even know and understand differences and what they bring or can mean, how can you even start being reflective on all the different aspects of this art, right? And so starting to ask, even going back to almost fundamental basic questions of really rethinking your construct and your understanding of the form, and then applying it out into the diversity that you either have or don't have, right? And then why is that? And I want to kind of circle all the way back, which is fitting into this question now, because both Joshua and Christina slightly entered that, and not in a within their answer. And this is what happens oftentimes. And so I'll reiterate, like Joshua, at one point you just said, you know, in my area, people like really didn't know ballet or didn't know that. And Christina, you said, and then at the company in England, they went into the inner city to give dance a chance. And so here's another thing. If you automatically think diversity, inner city, there's a lot that needs to be checked and understood within self. All people of color do not live in the inner city. And, right. And so even if you have that thought, that is a very limiting thought. It is based in micro insults. It's based on assumptions and limitations of people, plural, right? And so understanding that even if you were to do any type of outreach, even if you wanted to increase your diversity in whether it's your school, your company, your studio, understanding if you go to this one, I'm going into the inner city, you already are loaded with biases that are going to be in the long run detrimental, because you're really limiting what it is that you're stating that you're trying to achieve. So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked of even how is my company constructed? What are we trying to do? Like what are our goals here? What are our goals on the stage? What are our goals for the audience? What are our goals for dancers, right? There's a lot of questions that need to be sorted through in order to even get into, right, the levels of when we're talking about the day-to-day training and preparation and practices for the stage, and then even onto the stage itself.
Yeah, so it's really, it's you know, there's some practical things that can happen immediately, right? That can in and of themselves could be a beginning, not the end. And then there's actually, I love what you said, Kat, because I'm just learning about Adam. I mean, I've known of him, but I'm understanding him in this context much better, and I'm really appreciating him, and I'm grateful to be a part of this. And it's beautiful to hear a dancer of your level from his company saying that. Like, I felt that, and to know that already as a dancer, to know that I'm in that's the leadership and the desire and where the heart is, you're right. That's kind of the starting point in terms of like, where are you with all of this and what you were saying, Roni. And so then you start to then you start to do that. That's when, you know, but first people have to even know that that's where you're at, because it might be obvious to you, but it might not be obvious to others. And so it's huge already that a leading dancer is Adam's company can say that about him and really feel that, because that's already impacting her and her contribution and her trust and her I'm assuming this, Kat, that's how I would feel. And so there's actually, like, I want to say almost kind of a very therapeutic nature to this in terms of what needs to be looked at. You know, just some, and empathy, like what about like teaching, empathy, again, I just think it should be a mandatory curriculum from the very, very beginning, but of any kind of education. But let's just say here we are, like, how can you draw that? How can you bring that into the daily or the regular practice, or some consistent thing that needs to happen that can create these shifts up here and in here, you know? So that's so there are levels of this, you know, they're the little practical, the tights and the ribbons and the dance belts, and then there's the, you know, what's being said in the studios, what's being communicated, the awareness of the teachers. Maybe there's a regular teacher gathering where you talk about, hey, I said this thing today. I don't know if it was the right thing, or what's the best way to articulate this, or what are you guys finding? Like there's that community of teachers, because, you know, we're figuring it out too. Everybody's trying to figure this out. So I think the more opportunities there are to kind of connect, you know, and talk, and even just talk about like, I don't know I don't know how to teach anymore. I don't know how to, you know, so, or whatever it is, that there's space for that. So, but that always comes from the top, and, you know, the top might even be board members. Like, how about them? Like, get that, like, you know, you know, that's, you know, all of that. So I know that said a lot, but it's a big question.
Your donors.
Yeah,
Because that's
well, I think that
On
I
both.
mean, everyone's absolutely correct in what they're saying, but to bring it more to a point, I think just by doing, to answer your question, by doing what Adam is doing, which is having these conversations and making it public, and then that, as a director, it is starting from the top, and then you have what Katlyn and you guys were saying, you know, the younger dancers, the younger dancers, and then the dancers in the company, encouraging the younger dancers, or you know, having this community with conversations like this, so that way, you know, you have these, if we're talking about the heart, these intentions from the heart that's coming from the top, with which is met with rather the information that is coming from people like African American dancers who are experiencing things. It's coming together and connecting and having a true honest conversations, because, you know, like I keep saying, like, some people, they have no idea. They have no idea where to start. They don't even know how to have a conversation. They don't know, okay, if I say something, if I mention this, is that offensive? Is that not offensive? If I say something, is that offensive? If I don't say anything, is that offensive as well? If I say the wrong thing, and it's really it's really confusing. So it's like, if it comes from the top and comes from the middle and the end, which is the young dancers, and we come together, I mean, that's where the change starts. And I think directors, because I never want to force anyone to do anything they don't want to do, but if directors would have to you know, maybe have, like, I don't know, I just image, like, I picture a maybe like a video on their ballet company website, just saying, listen, like, with the way things are going these days, we are open to having these conversations, and we want to make a change. And then you start from there. And like Adam says, my door is always open. You know, that I'm reminded of this incident when we were rehearsing, I want to say Carmina Burana, and one of the wardrobe ladies, like, we were wearing skirts, and one of the wardrobe ladies said, you know, we fit your skirt perfectly to your skin tone. And they were like, we did. And they were so proud of it. And I was like, you know, that's great. And then it matched my skin tone, and it was great. And then we got on stage, and we did like a stage / dress rehearsal. And I was told later that they need to re-dye the skirt because it was too dark. So then you think about that and you say, okay, wait, it matched my skin tone. Actually, the exact wording was, it was too dark compared to everyone that was on stage. So then you think about that, okay, if it matched my skin tone and the skirt is too dark for everyone compared to everyone on stage, you're kind of saying in a way that I was too dark.
Right.
Although that's not what they were trying to say. They were just saying because of the light and all these other things. So of course, you know, I was like, okay, what do I do? Do I say something? What do I do? And, you know, going back to being the young dancer, you have to encourage and always teach people to speak up for themselves. Doesn't matter what happens. Doesn't matter if you get punished. You have to stand up for yourself. So I went up to the choreographer, and then I went up to Adam, and Adam brought me aside, and we talked about it, and it was the problem was solved. The problem was fixed. But, you know, it's just like, you know, it was one of those situations where it's just like, one, yeah, you got to stick up for yourself, but it's like, that my mindset never crossed it, you know, it never crossed their mind that this is how it was coming across, because they're not of me, you know. So that's why I'm saying it has to be from the top, the willingness to listen, to understand, to be patient, and from the bottom, if you will, the courage, whether it comes from oneself or the community, to speak up for yourself.
Yes, and I'd like to add to that, Joshua, right? Like, when we're talking about directors, everyone doesn't have the same philosophy the same intent, the same experience, the same heart as your Adam Sklute, Robert Garland, Virginia Johnson, right? Like there's some Alonzo King lines, like there's some that Arthur Mitchell, there's some that just understand what they want to capture and present on stage in a way that it's all about bringing the beauty that this world possesses onto the stage, right? And there's ways that that's done. And so when other directors, they don't have that same mindset. And so it's going to be more challenging to even encourage them. That's why I said was thinking about like basically asking like, what is your mindset? Because their way of bringing what they want to bring to the stage may be very different from those that we are honoring, and rightfully so honoring today in this conversation. And then that's real, and that's something that needs to be understood. And then what does that mean? But I think that also with them being very honest with self.
Well, and I agree with you. That's a good point. And it would be interesting because to be completely forward, if directors didn't do that, that would give dancers of ethnic descent, a better decision about, okay, maybe I don't want to go there, because they're not having this conversation, know. Mm. So there's something to that.
Yeah, and that is, I was just thinking about that, like, just like with, businesses out there now, people are looking at what they're saying and what they're doing, and if they're going to support the business with them or not, because, that could be just fine and dandy for a director, though, because that means, okay, I have my white company, so I'm fine with that. So then there's, it's, and I doubt that that's, we're, the gate has opened, and I think that, as everybody's been saying, first of all, conversations and really like the entire organization understanding what that is, so that, it's like when I was at Trey McIntyre Project, we had a branding person come, and the dancers, everybody was in that branding session, we were owning the words that we were a part of this organization and all that it was. And it wasn't like fake, like we had to, I have to remember the elevator speech. It was like, yes, it was clear to say who we are, what we're about, what we stand for. And that happened to be, it was a small company, of course. But so there's something about that, like the culture, right? The culture that you're building, and then feeling proud of that, because we're actually, there's a evolution that we're a part of, and we all are growing, and we're all expanding. That has to be, this is about humanity and the awakening of this moment in time. This is an awakening that's happening, that we're all, this is quite a time to be here and alive. And it's really, I feel like in some ways we've been waiting all our lives for this, let's say, or lifetimes, if you believe that. So here we are, and this is part of it. This is part of, like, it's juicy, it's painful, it's tricky, there's so many things wrapped up in this, but it will be, art is like the voice of humanity. Like what are we doing if we're not like sharing who we are, and so, and what we have to say. And so it's there. Yeah, this is, again, huge, but I like what you said, Joshua, because there's a lot of pieces to it, and all of us being conscious,
Yeah. And it's been a long road, and this road has been under construction for a very long time. And at this moment, we're seeing a lot of different pieces come together. And I would say, like, to both your points, Christina and Joshua, with the companies, we also are seeing companies rush to make a statement. However, the internal structures are not often there. Mm-hmm. And if you're making these statements just to bring in more income or consumer loyalty or consumer exploration, and you're not treating the internal employees in the same manner that your statement showcases, that's problematic as well, right? And so it does take a lot of work. So like Christine, as you said, like it in this moment, there is pain, and that's purposeful and necessary. Change is not comfortable. And so being comfortable with the discomfort is important, and to understand that and to do the reflective and introspective work is really where it begins, to come back to the question up to the directors and decision makers and stakeholders.
So I'm gonna wrap us all up. Thank you all for really what was a tremendous first conversation, or not quite first conversation about this, you know, topic of dismantling racism in ballet. And I do want to thank again Ballet West and Adam Sklute for creating this space, because what I think I'm hearing everybody say kind of in a lot of different ways is that this space fundamentally needs to be created for people to even know what's going on. And for me, my takeaway, just listening to you all, like in a little nutshell, I think something a director could do, somebody who runs a studio could do, is they could ask their dancers how they're doing. And they could have the humility to receive whatever the answer is, just to check in. You know, how are we doing? How do you feel here? Or at least opening up the space for dancers of color to answer that question. It doesn't have to be face to face, but to give that space for the conversation, because it seems like there's a lot of things that if you walked into a studio and these weren't your concerns, you wouldn't even ever see them. You know, you wouldn't even ever know that, you know, about the black skirt or the blonde wig, or you don't know that these are how these Black dancers got here. You know, they got here through all of this anyway, and they're here, which must speak to the tremendous talent, perseverance, etc., the people who make it this far, right? I love that the conversation is happening. I think it's a really great start, and I want to thank you all so much for being so open-hearted and thoughtful in your answers. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Yes, thank you.